Hi, I'm Angela Anderson. I actually work for ITSD Doler. I'm on loan to DHSS. I was set to work on Vaccine Navigator and help get it set up. We talked to a lot of the RITs and the LPHAs before we did this, so they've had a lot of input on this tool as we went through it. What I'm going to talk to today is the processes that we've set forth. So these slides were created by Susan Thomas. I've added a little bit in here just because of who the audience is today. Susan is on the phone and she is going to correct me if I get anything wrong. So we'll start through here. I will say that I'm really appreciative to you guys for helping these teams. If you know more about this tool, then you can help them through the process. So gaining access to Navigators. So if someone calls you and asks how they get access to it, on the vaccine administrator page, there is a link to a WUFU form that allows them to get into Vaccine Navigator. What that does is it sends a form to Susan and Major Miller, who look at that form. They get them access to Vaccine Navigator. If they have any questions about what the event looks like that they want to set up for the initial time, then they would call back the event coordinator or the event host. But that's why that's there, is to kind of get some initial start into how they're going to use Vaccine Navigator, how many people they're going to be vaccinating, if it is a mass vax event with the Hmong. So scheduling an event, and I probably won't go through the whole event schedule, but I will bring it over here for you guys to see. And it brings up a page. Actually, you guys' firewall won't let us bring it up, so we won't do that. It brings up an event page where people put in how many doses that they have, how long they're going to be scheduling their event. So if they're going to do it 8 to 5, if they're going to do 15 minutes or 30 minutes between. A lot of that depends on how many volunteers they have. So they need to kind of have that idea before they start to schedule their event in the first place. We have a naming convention that we want to use. That helps the phone center. It helps you find your own event. It helps people in the community find the event and understand what those events are. So if we name it Mass Vax, then we know that it's going to be a lot of vaccinations in one place. We've got people running through it. We would kind of like to know if it's going to be a drive-up event or if it's going to be a walk-in event. There's also private events and public events, and we'll get into those a little bit more as we get through the slides. Clinic ID. So you may get a lot of questions about this. For us to enter data into Show Me Vax, we have to either have a clinic ID right now, because right now, as we're still making changes to Vaccine Navigator, like we just had a request from FEMA to add another field. So as we're still making a lot of changes, we're doing file uploads instead of doing a web service. So we have to have a clinic ID. As soon as we get to the point where we can do that web service, we're going to need a facility ID. Major Miller and Susan Thomas are going to be helping the LPHAs and the RIT teams get those facility or clinic IDs, whichever those are, at that time, so that we can get those back to them for when they schedule their event. That is how we get the information into Show Me Vax. When you schedule your event, in the notes section, if we could have them provide the information that they want the call center to share. This is one of the big pain points. People call into the call center. The LPHA may have given direction that they want them to call directly to the LPHA. So just whatever the direction is, we need to put that in the notes so the call center knows how to direct those team members. If it's a private event, how they want them scheduled, whatever the case may be, kind of, if you have direction for them, put that in those notes. What happens when you schedule an event? And Susan, please pipe up if I've missed anything, okay? Within 24 hours, your event will be put on a calendar. Major Miller and Susan both are working through those. They just double check it to make sure that your timing's not off, or that you didn't accidentally put down that you're giving out 6,000 vaccinations when you really meant 600. And then within 48 hours, the event is available on your dashboard so you can view the patients that have signed up. And you can schedule patients too. That's a new feature to Vaccine Navigator. When we rolled out, we were trying to get it out as fast as possible, so there's new features being added, and we're taking in information to try and make it better. Notifications aren't sent out immediately about that event, but we did roll out scheduling links to every single person who was eligible in every area except A, C, and D. A, C, and D both have, or all three have, too many residents to schedule at one time. So we are sending them out in date order. So as they've registered, we did February up through February 9th in A, C, and D. And then the next night we did up through February 10th. The next night we did through February 11th, so that we can move those through and get everybody out a scheduling link. They can check back on that scheduling link to see when there's events scheduled or created, and they can start to schedule for those. Communications include that link, and they're sent out weekly until someone schedules their first dose. So once you've scheduled your first dose, you will no longer receive that scheduling link weekly. Once you've received your first dose, so you've made it to your appointment, you got your dose, then within 17 days of that dose, you'll start receiving your second dose reminder, letting you know that you need to schedule for your clinic. The one caveat to that is that we're hoping with this process that our vaccinators are scheduling their first dose and their second dose clinic at the same time, and we're scheduling our patients at the first and the second time, so their second dose clinic. Then they wouldn't get that scheduling link because they're already scheduled. This is what an optimal timeline looks like, so it's smooth. On day 1, you submit your new event. On day 2, it's live. There's some emails that go out for people who are new that have registered. If we're sending people who haven't registered in Vaccine Navigator, they'll get their scheduling link within 24 to 48 hours usually. Vaccine Navigator sends out that. We also use the call center to make calls out to people who do not have access to the internet or they don't have an email address on file. So the call center sends out an outbound call. It's automated. It asks them to call back into the call center to schedule. And then the call center representatives look up the events in their area. If they don't find one in their area, they'll look further out if they need to. And then, of course, the event is how many ever days out. We can't schedule more than 8 days out, though. And there is a reason for that. If we have to move anything, it is a pretty big lift to reschedule all those people. So if we had 2,000 people scheduled for an event, we have to move it or we have to change it. It's a pretty big change. So we try not to schedule too much further than that unless it is a second dose clinic. Patients can schedule through their link, they can call the call center, or the event host can schedule. So the LPHA, the RIT, they can all schedule through their dashboard. So private events. When we first set this up, we set this up for employers. So private events were meant for employers who were vaccinating their work population. So I will say that initially it was open to anybody who had that private event code. We have evolved that private code to help us with those second dose events, and so it has changed a little bit. So we, effective Monday, they've worked on that code all week, we tested it. So effective Monday, even with a private code, they would still have to be in an eligible phase or tier to be able to schedule. So that's a little history behind why that has been a little bit of a problem. But the event organizer, if you schedule a private event, is responsible for getting that event code out. So if you have a population and you want to give out 100 doses, you have to get that private event code out to those people. We have said in the past that you could use, especially if we didn't schedule your second dose clinic right away, you could use that private event code and notify the people from your first dose clinic and give them that private event code for their second dose, and they could schedule them for that. Patients must still be registered in Vaccine Navigator to get a private code. They have to go through that process. Ways to communicate that: you can pull the information from Show Me Vax. We can pull the information from your first event for you. We're working on that for, actually, I think it's next week, and Susan, please correct me if I'm wrong, for the LPHAs and the RIT teams to pull that themselves to see who was vaccinated. That should be available next week as well. And then the call center will not be able to schedule without that code. So if you're going to have the call center schedule it for you, you need to make sure that they have that code as well. Booster events. March 19th, again, that's one of those enhancements that we've been talking about. We initially didn't realize we wouldn't have vaccination all over the state. You know, we didn't realize it was going to be that limited when we first started putting this in. So didn't really stop people from scheduling second doses in first dose clinics and boosters in boosters in primary clinics and primaries in booster clinics. So March 19th, that should go into effect where you can only schedule a primary in a primary clinic and a booster in a booster clinic. Currently, it does allow you to do both. We're working on the back end to stop that. So we send out a notification if somebody scheduled a primary and a booster event. We send out a notification telling you you're going to have to reschedule that. We provide event organizers with their codes for the booster, their private event code if that's how they scheduled it. And we would like, again, for your booster event to be scheduled at the same time that they do their first one. So if you're working with an LPHA or a RIT team member and they're setting up their primary event, we would really like them to go ahead and set up their secondary event. At the end of that secondary event, then they can start scheduling the same people through so that we've got those same patients coming through on the second event. Changing, canceling, and modifying events. I already talked to this a little bit. We don't schedule any more than 8 days out, and that's because if there's going to be a change to it, it's a little more difficult to make a change and notify everyone. We've had issues with this in the past already where one of the events was scheduled at a church. We had to change it the day before to a different location. We had to get notifications out to about 1,300 people and hope that they got the notification. So, and Susan, I might let you talk to this. This was some of the information that you wanted to add.
Yeah, so this is basically when you're doing a booster event, what we're finding is that everybody schedules their booster events a little bit differently. Some people, when they're having their primary event, are just telling patients, well, just come back at the same time, same place for your booster event. And they don't want that person to have any interaction or interface with Vaccine Navigator to do that. If that's your process for your booster event, we would request that you schedule a private event with a private event code. Know that Vaccine Navigator cannot just copy and paste from a previous event into a new event. So you can either print that list from your primary event and schedule those all yourself within the scheduling dashboard, or you can also process them as walk-in during that day of the event. Another system some people are using is allowing the person to reschedule themselves into the booster event. If that's the case, again, you can do a private event. You can give everybody the code while they're at their primary event, and you can say, hey, you're going to get a booster scheduling notification. When you get that, here's your private code to put in and schedule that event. Some people are, like Angie had mentioned, you can set up that secondary booster event at the same time as the primary event. And then you can use that scheduling link on the day that they're doing their primary event to schedule them for that booster event. Just do it right there while they're there with you. Most people are having pretty good luck with getting their patients to come back when they use that system. And the last bullet here is just to say, people are calling the call center saying, I wasn't told when I'm supposed to do my booster event, I don't know what to do. And we know that that's probably not the case, that, you know, they probably did get that information at some point in time during their primary event. But this was just to kind of remind us to make sure that you're having good communication with the people that are coming in for the primary event to let them know what they're supposed to do to schedule for that booster event. Like I said, they're human, they're going to forget, they're going to lose their paper or whatever, but just as much communication as clear as you can about how they're supposed to schedule that booster event is really just the point here on this last bullet. And then I think, lastly, if the call center doesn't know which one of those scheduling methods you're using for that event, they really can't, it's very hard for them to help that person schedule for that event. So, Angie mentioned earlier, if it's possible when you're scheduling to add into the notes section how you want those people to register, it's really helpful when they're calling in and they don't know what they're supposed to do. And, you know, the call center doesn't have instructions on which system you're using to schedule them. So that's when that disconnect sometimes happens, especially in those booster event situations. I think that's about all that was on that slide.
It was. Thank you, Susan. So I'm wrapping up here pretty quickly, but how do citizens get information about the events? They have access to register for public events through Vaccine Navigator. So they can use their scheduling link, they can get in that way. They can also go to mostopscovid.com and go to the events page there. They can get in that way. As long as they have a scheduling link, they can still schedule. So that's the DHSS website, DHSS. The Vaccine Navigator emails, text messages. For those with landlines and no emails, the call center will call them. And then local promotion, and we suggest social media campaigns to get this information out so that you can get people in your area signed up. They get a lot of messages from the state. They ignore a lot of messages from the state. So getting that social media out will be helpful. Then lastly, what happens the day before the event? And this is really important. So filling out the event survey, the vaccine information the day before is better. It pre-populates all of the information so that we can get it into Show Me Vax, but you have to do it at least 20 minutes before the event. Otherwise, you're going to have people starting to back up, but because it takes that long to get into the database. So if you can do it the night before, that's better. If not, do it at least 20 minutes before your event. Signing in patients. You'll have a scheduled, we're working on an electronic patient list where you can just check them off to show that they're there. Right now it's just a paper list. You print off the list from your dashboard. And then that way you also can kind of check at the end of the day your administered versus your patient list. And then you also have a way to do walk-ins, and since I can't get past your firewall, I can't show you how to do those, but on your dashboard there is a walk-in spot, and you click on that. If they're not registered in Navigator, you would register them, and it takes a few minutes for that to get through the process, but then you can schedule them for the event. If they are already, you can automatically schedule them for your event. Recording the vaccination information, there's an administration link. We have a lot of people confused about that process. They think everybody has to have some sort of access to it. For your event, you get a link, and then you look up your patient. It's not something that you have to have access to. Your event gets access to it. And then you distribute that link to everybody who's giving vaccinations. They go in, they look up the patient either by the ID or the name, date of birth, and then you administer that patient. You put that data in. That goes into that vaccine information. So, and I said that was last, that's the last bit about Vaccine Navigator. This is some of the things that are coming up to change. We've already put a few of these things in. We did a scheduling distribution strategy. So I just mentioned that we got all of those scheduling links out. That was so there are 400 and about 70,000 people registered in Vaccine Navigator right now. So there's a lot of people out there. We also got people the ability to register at the LPHAs. That was something new as well. Next week, I mentioned that we're going to have those primary and secondary doses, so where you can't schedule outside of those. And then the comorbidity screening actually went in this last week. It was something that we had to have. They do have to show proof from their doctor that they have a clinical condition is actually what it is. So we also, the patient data update survey, that one is a little trickier, and I will just tell you all this because you're going to be working with the LPHAs. We are struggling to find a way to share that patient data if it's just registered. If they're scheduled for that LPHA's event, we can give them that information. If they're not scheduled for that event, we're trying to find a way to share that information with them. Right now, we can't. We're working with legal to find a way. And then we're finding a way for people to kind of retake the survey. If they gave wrong information the first time, we've had a lot of people spell their names wrong, so trying to get a way for them to go in and fix their own information. That is all that I have for you guys today. Do you have any questions?